Okay, so mixed version testing. So yesterday we had an incident. I should mention a little bit what's interesting. The incident itself has more of the specific details, but most generally what happened here was we had a failure on the staging environment, and we had a quarantine of the test. Sorry, let me say. We had a failure on the staging environment, which led to tests failing. Those tests were then quarantined with an MR, which meant a new package was created that needed to be deployed, right? So that was the general thing. Now, if I actually show a little picture. And so this is super interesting because we've always known it is an edge case in the way our testing works, that you can't if you have a test failure on staging and only on staging, it's very hard to recover. So
are you talking about the epic?
So let me share. So here we have our pipeline. So we had gone through this already, right? So we'd already put the package through staging canary, we'd already run tests, and we had that failure on staging. Now, what this meant is when we got the new package, and we needed to basically have our new package on staging in order for our tests to begin to pass again. Now, the reason for that is because staging canary, these QA tests on step 2 are designed to test, as well as testing the new package and the new functionality, they're also designed to test mixed version compatibility. So what that means is mixed version compatibility was a problem we were previously seeing because our original pipelines deployed to staging, then they deployed to production canary, and then they deployed to production. Now, when we have a canary environment and a main environment, they share a database. So we have our canary production and our production are using the same database. And what we had been finding was that occasionally when we had this mixed version incompatibility, users, and unfortunately it was usually users on production, were trying to use features which had the database would have been updated by the production canary deployment, and the code on production wouldn't be backwards compatible, so users would have problems. So that was the sort of original problem we tried to solve through this kind of mixed version project. And we solved it in 2 ways. One was we changed the staging setup and introduced the staging canary. The staging canary, so that staging and production became the same. They each had a canary, they each have a main fleet. There's a staging database, there's a production database. And then the idea of the mixed version testing is we put the package on staging canary, and when we run the tests, they are testing staging canary to see if the new package looks good. And then they hit staging, which has the previous package on it, and they check that one still behaves as expected as well. Right? Make sense? So we got unlucky. It's a known edge case, but it's not a common one. So we got unlucky with our incident because what we deployed on staging failed tests. The recovery for that was a quarantine of the tests in the new package. We deployed that to staging canary, where it was fine and happy, but the mixed version tests were still hitting staging, which had the previous version installed. And we don't have a way on our current pipeline to actually say, progress to staging. This was fine, it's tests. So in that case, what we had to do was basically bypass our pipeline, deploy directly to staging, which you did, and that allowed staging canary and staging to end up being able to pass tests.
So yeah, I think that was a really good explanation. I have 2 comments / questions. First one is, we quarantine the test, which kind of tells me that, so staging canary smoke tests, or that QA test, interact with staging's tests then?
They are pretty much the same tests, yes. They might actually be the same tests.
So I guess what I'm more or less confused about is like when those set of tests got to staging canary, they should have been quarantined. And my understanding of quarantine is don't run them.
Oh, I see what you mean. So I don't know this for sure, but I think what may happen, and actually perhaps this is where one of the improvements, this is a super good question though, yes, is perhaps what the staging canary tests are actually doing is triggering the staging tests. So rather than saying, here is a suite of tests that hit the two environments, which is actually what I thought. Yeah, maybe your question makes me actually think that what it's saying is the tests are kind of coupled to the environment, and it just happens they both get triggered.
Because then why don't we have it backwards? Or why don't we just have it in one environment? I guess that's like a whole different question of like
in terms of like the tests, you mean? Or
yeah, because once we're quarantining a set of tests and we are expected we kind of expected it to quarantine on staging canary, but it didn't because staging QA tests were not quarantined at that point. So then I guess my question would be kind of like why run that in the canary stage?
Yes.
Or if we run it on the canary stage for staging, then why do we run it again after staging if we do?
Okay, yes, that's a great question. So that one I can definitely answer. So on your first question, it's a super great question. I think what we probably want to figure out or find out from quality is a little bit more about that structure. I actually don't know, but your question is a very good one, which is how are those tests basically linked to the environments? Yeah. On your second question, we actually don't run those tests after staging anymore. And the tests after staging have moved, and they now sit on the post-deployment migration pipeline.
Oh,
because perfect. What we're testing there is we say we run the migrations on staging, we run the tests on staging, we go to production. So yeah, on our main auto-deploy pipeline, the only time we test staging is following the staging canary deployment.
Okay, that's...
Let me say that. Let me explain
timeline-wise, that makes sense.
Sorry, wrong button. Let me. Sorry. Oh, I keep pressing buttons and none of them are doing what I'm expecting. Okay, so we deploy. So we get a new package. We deploy it. It deploys to staging canary and also staging ref in parallel.
Yeah.
Then we run tests on staging canary.
Yeah.
If those are passing, we proceed automatically to production canary. And then we run tests. Then you'll see, well, you don't see, but then the baking time happens. Yeah. And then you get your alert. And then if you click to manually promote, we deploy to staging. And then we deploy to production. So all of the testing is happening around the canary environments, basically.
Right. But also in step 2, that is also testing the previous version of staging. What I understood that your original question around like how the quarantine didn't end up affecting staging, I think is a really interesting one. But my understanding is that these tests are they are hitting both the staging canary and the staging environments, basically. So yes, there are 2 suites in there, or there are various different suites, and they are designed to test a new package and also look specifically for mixed version problems that would be visible on staging. Right. Probably a good idea to sync them when they get to, like, just for those specs. It's probably a good idea for them to sync at the canary stage.
Yes, agreed. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we can probably bring that up. as
Yeah.
in that incident.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, please leave a comment on the incident. Like, you
Yeah.
know, like Zeph was super involved in designing these tests, and he led all the test design. So he'll certainly be able to explain, like, or point us to the documentation on like how things are set up and how like what we can expect there.
Yeah. Also, what this kind of tells me is, I guess, like, remember how I said, like, oh, I have two questions, but it led to like a whole different discussion. My second point is it kind of smells like what's it called? Like you know, like how we use a pick label and then it like does like different things with the pipeline. Kind of feels similar as a solution to this. But
Yes.
but also it feels dangerous if we don't know what it does. So for example, I'm thinking of a label that, like, I don't know, say like quarantine tests as a label, and that MR gets merged, and because it's like, I don't know, in an incident, it would deploy immediately to canarying staging and staging in order to get those quarantine tests passing on both environments. But then, like, if say like the release manager doesn't know that, then they can like promote another package that possibly went through, have a really weird staging deploy going at that point. I don't
There's
know.
probably something in that for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Somebody mentioned in the incident channel, I can't remember who it was. So this possibly ties a little bit as well to some work that engineering productivity are doing around. So they're working at the moment to allow only the tests you need to run to be running. So when you do a merge, you wouldn't necessarily run every test. It would detect what you've actually been changing and run the right tests. So this feels like it's a sort of fits a little bit like there, where you do have like quarantine, and that runs a special case.
Yeah. If we can have that a bit more granular, then yeah, definitely. Right.
Gives us an option, doesn't it? When you said that, though, you also have reminded me of one other thing which you mentioned very, very near the beginning of our call, and is relevant to this, which is so that we resolved this incident by deploying directly to staging. So deploying the package we had on Staging Canary direct to staging. We did take a little bit of risk with that because it was a package with like other changes in, which hadn't fully passed testing. Now, a slightly less risky one, and the one that Myra was sort of helping investigate, was whether we had a package which had the previously deployed, like a previously tested package with just the quarantine MR on top of it, which I think we probably did have somewhere because the pick label was used. But that would have been another way we could have reduced risk on this a little bit. As it was, because we'd been blocked for so long, it was better to just unblock. But that's the other way. It's like, the smaller the change set, the safer things get.
For sure.
If things had been super, super risky, like we would have had an option to roll staging back from the version you deployed. So we could have recovered staging that way, right? Because the deploy you did was completely safe there. So that bit wasn't super risky, at least.
Yeah. And then that doesn't automatically get to production. We would need to unblock the auto deploy and for that to go through. So as long as it's staging, it's not like the biggest deal.
Exactly. Yeah, there was definitely some mixed version risk, because what you lost was you lost the mixed version testing, basically, because we stuck the same package version onto staging canaries there. So you did lose a little bit of testing, but overall the risk wasn't massive. And I think when we've been blocked for that many hours, it was a decent trade-off.
Yep, exactly.
So there were two bits that I mentioned, but I put links in this in the agenda, basically. So we solved mixed version testing with two ways, right? We added the staging canary, So we had a project which delivery led, and then we had introduced the mixed version tests, which Zeph from quality led. And then those two pieces together should be giving us some mixed version protection.
Yep. Interesting stuff.
And this is one of the things that now gives us a few extra complexities. So, for example, all of this mixed version testing is the reason why when we roll back staging, we then put it back onto the right version. Because otherwise, again, our mixed version testing is testing against it. What we really need is staging canary and staging to end up with the same two versions that will be production canary and production, because that's basically what we're testing for. So that's the reason why we roll back staging and then redeploy onto it as well to get that versioning. And it also linked to a little bit to another issue which we have going about how much locking do we need to put around the post-deploy migrations environments. Again, it's a similar thing, which is actually how much, like, do we have enough protection over the staging version to be able to make the mixed version testing dependable?
Yeah, that actually reminds me. This is kind of going back to investigating like what happened during the 24 hours basically that this was down for. But basically, so I guess my question would be that this package got deployed to staging, like the one with the failing set of tests.
Yes.
When was that?
That was unfortunate. Oh yeah, like yes, I don't know when that actually happened. Oh well, do you know what? Interesting, right? So it actually may not have been recently, right? Because what triggered the tests to become unstable was a problem on the staging environment.
Yeah, and also, is there a faster way to detect that? So let's say that we are looking at a failing QA spec on G-staging Canary, and we raise an incident. I didn't take a look at the exact failure, but like, does it say that it's a problem on staging?
I believe so. Yes, I think it does. I think it does. I think what this one took a little bit of, this one was a bit unusual because I think we knew quite quickly the cause of the original failures, which was down to not having enough resources available in whatever the projects were. So the test couldn't create the repositories they needed. So quality spent quite a lot of time cleaning up, which was all good, but that just wasn't enough to restore the stability of this test, basically, which is why it got quarantined. So there's kind of like two efforts to recover from there.
I see. Yeah, I'm looking at, this is the QA reliable 1 out of 10. I'll take a closer look at this later, but yeah, like, so I guess for the next time, because this was kind of a special case because we were blocked for so long and we kind of wanted to get packages through. But I think actually the next time we run into this, the correct path is actually to roll back staging instead of deploy this.
Yes, agreed. I do think you're right. So if we could have, well, I mean, the challenge would have been, the step which we needed to do for that would be to figure out when was the flaky test introduced. Yeah. Because I don't think this was caused by a software change. I think this was genuinely caused by running out of resources. And then not being able to easily recover from that.
Yeah.
So
it's like a 2 problem in 1.
Yeah. Exactly.
Or rather 3 problem in 1, because we had an incident for the same environment right before that.
Exactly. So it was super unlucky for sure.
Yeah, okay.
That's where, but you're right. Yeah, that would have been a good thing for us to have checked sort of earlier on in the incident. In fact, we should always do that quite early on, which is like, is this a thing that we can roll back from? Because you're right, actually, yeah, like, and maybe we need to be rolling back staging a little bit more for these things, because actually, if this had been a quarantine MR to do with a test that had come from a software change, yeah, you're absolutely spot on. Like, we should have rolled staging back and got back to the versions that way.
Yeah. Yeah, so that way, like, we can just unblock that and then just continue with the auto deploy, and whatever comes up after. Yeah.
That's it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Makes sense.
So it's always a little
resolved one way or another. I think we got lucky in some way, shape, or form with this one.
This
but
one was, yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things. It's definitely an interesting one. It'll be interesting to see what we can do to improve from here, because, say, it's not a very common problem,
it's not.
but it is a known edge case. So it certainly won't be the only time we ever hit it. And it is a bit of a pain, as you discovered when we have it, where you're like, we need to get this fixed. Do you know where we might actually? I know you were able to do a push, so it's fine. It's almost an example, though, for a Hotpatch. I wonder if we should have Hotpatch staging.
How do you Hotpatch?
So we have a different process. We have a whole different pipeline, a whole different tool where you can basically generate a. I'll try and find you a link where we can basically generate a effectively like a code patch that bypasses our deployment pipeline and gets applied directly onto an environment. Actually, we probably, I mean, in this case, the risk wasn't enormous, so it was probably quicker. But yeah, what we also could have done is hot patched the quarantine directly onto staging, and that should have passed the tests.
Yeah. I was actually looking for some way to do, I think what you're oh, come on, stop making me log in. It's like what I've been complaining about for quite some time. There's like a whole thread about it too right now.
Yeah, you're definitely not the first person I've heard.
Yeah. My goodness. Give me a sec. My UV key is at the back of my screen, so I have to get up and then do.
That's obvious.
But yeah, I think can you, if you know the
let me see, I just
process
found it for you.
to that, yeah, maybe you can add that and then I can take a look.
So, and this is something which Skyback's been working on a bit at the moment, and what we need to introduce for our hot patch process is a bit similar to our rollbacks practice, so that we actually have a way where we run these semi-regularly or regularly, so that we can actually make sure they're still working as expected, and that everybody knows it's an option and here's how to use it. We don't do it on production except for an S1, but actually if we hadn't been comfortable, so say for example yesterday the next package headed for staging had like 500 changes in it, and one of those was like super risky looking, or whatever reason where we decided that looked too risky to miss those tests, we probably wouldn't have been able to roll back, because I said I don't actually think it's a new test. I think it just became unstable, but we should have validated that. And then our final option would be to hot patch onto staging and restore the tests that way.
Yeah. We have many options, it seems.
We have options.
hindsight.
Yeah. So it's good. Well, that's what analysis is for, right?
Cool.
Is there any other stuff that would be useful to talk about on this for mixed version testing?
I think that's it.
Perfect. Okay, great. I'll stop this recording.